Starting this week, we shift the conversation from the experiences and perspectives of various racial and ethnic groups in our society to the ways in which the institutions of our society respond or not respond to the needs of various groups. In so doing, we are only scratching the surface of what are deeply complex issues. For instance, this week we look at healthcare, environmental racism, and educational inequity. Each sector in itself could be the subject of an extensive conversation. So we won't be able to give these issues their full due. However, you may want to more fully address one of these issues in your final project. The purpose of this week's discussion is primarily to take note of the various institutional ways in which racism is expressed and experienced. For instance, Norgaard's study of the Karuk tribe in Northern California reveals how environmental racism denies the Karuk access to their traditional sources of food, which in turn adversely affects their health and their social and cultural bonds. And in a different way, Majora Carter talks about combating environmental racism due to industrialization in a low-income area of the Bronx. Sarid and her colleagues show how the lack of access to health care disproportionately affects low-income persons of color. And then Darling Hammond shows how the No Child Left Behind Act, which was supposedly designed to improve education for low-income students of color, actually alienates and hurts them more. Now, I didn't assign the article by Spadig Amerikaner, which is also on the Blackboard site, but you also may want to take a look at it as it discusses the role of disproportionate funding for schools and how that also negatively impacts students of color. Now, the information that is shared in these articles is not new. The data has been and continues to be very well known. What is lacking is the social and political will to address these issues head on in ways that reverse the practices and results of the past. When we look at data like this, we move into the area of institutional racism. And when analyzing institutional racism, usually we would be hard-pressed to find people in decision-making roles who are consciously and purposely attempting to discriminate against people of color. Nonetheless, the decisions they make based on the policy structures and practices of their institutions have that effect. And in part, our role as social change advocates is to keep calling attention to these inequities. And in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr., appeal to the moral conscience of decision makers to take responsibility for their institutions and for the consequences of their decisions. Now, taking on such a role is never easy. But if we don't speak up and act, who will? That's the challenge that lies before us.